Well, no doubt you've seen the pictures. The streets of the United Kingdom have been set ablaze as anger mounts over the country's border policies, which we discussed yesterday, is allowing a disgraceful number of illegal immigrants in the UK. Not only is mass immigration fueling the fire, but also two horrific fatal stabbings carried out on innocent young girls. But who is the full force of the law coming down on? These so-called far-right thugs? Deputy Editor of Spike, Fraser Myers, has been looking at the precarious social environment in the UK and why Keir Starmer is far more concerned about Facebook violence than the people who are tearing London apart. Fraser, welcome to the program. Physical violence is being carried out on the streets, and yet Keir Starmer is cracking down on Facebook crimes. They're kidding, aren't they?
Hi, thanks for having me. There is a crackdown on both. Certainly, people are, being given stiff sentences for violence on the streets. But certainly, the national conversation and certainly Keir Starmer's biggest fear is free speech. Essentially, there are so many people going through the courts who are being charged in relation to the recent riots, essentially for speech crimes. And, I don't want to excuse some of the things these people have said. Some of them are, incredibly racist, very inflammatory. But it is worrying that, in a free society, people should be able to express their views forthrightly without being cracked down on by the police. And it's bizarre, you hear in the British media, people use these words like armchair rioters, armchair thugs, as if it is really possible to commit violence from, the safety of your own home. The two things have been very, very dangerously conflated in recent weeks. Unfortunately, this isn't just Keir Starmer. He has an authoritarian streak. Certainly, I wouldn't deny that. But the British establishment have been boiling the frog on this issue for a very long time. Some of the laws being used to prosecute people go back to the 1970s, including some of the Race Relations Acts. There are the Communications Act as well, using people, getting people for social media. Also, a law passed under the Tories a few years ago, supposedly the Conservative government, who claim to believe in free speech, has been used to have a woman arrested for spreading misinformation. So, we are in serious danger here in Britain of losing our freedom of speech.
It is shocking. Let's take one specific example. A 51-year-old man has been sentenced to 2 months in prison for an offensive social media post. When violent protesters, rapists and all sorts of criminals are walking off scot-free, is the legal system lost? Like, all he was doing, as I understand it, and I've looked at the case and I've read two of the stories. All I can go on is what I've read. But I got the impression that he was pasting some of the footage from the riots, putting it on there and making a derogatory statement about the state of the UK. That can't possibly be something deemed to be inflammatory.
Unfortunately, I think, the judges and, the legal system have been caught up in this kind of hysteria where they see anything that is vaguely connected to the riots as something that can be punished, even simply, social media posts. We are in a very dangerous time at the moment. And yes, as you say, we're in a situation where the jails are so full in the UK that dangerous criminals are being let out early. Recently, someone who... So you have the situation where someone has killed someone, has been let out of after 5 months. It's often the case that people will be given suspended sentences. That means, they're not being jailed for cases like child pornography. And sometimes it's what people are putting together is like sometimes it's the same judge, who a few months ago would let someone walk free for a child pornography case and then would crack down hard, viciously hard on someone who has posted something quite offensive on Facebook. Again, I don't want to downplay some of the things that some people have been saying in relation to these riots. There have been some truly racist and despicable things said online, lots of rumours and misinformation, frankly, lies about this Southport killer being a Muslim.
Yeah.
But, we need free speech for those difficult cases. We don't need free speech to protect us from sharing images of kittens online. We need free speech to protect us when people have, difficult opinions, when people have difficult things to say. And especially a lot of this criticism, as you suggested, it is aimed at the government as well. It's not just aimed at migrants. It's aimed at the government's handling of migration, or mishandling, I should say.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have a policy at all.
Correct. And you had that shocking number of people that came into the border on 11 boats in one day last Sunday. No reportage of that on Sunday night or Monday morning until it eventually hit mainstream media. So why don't they tell us the truth? You know, I just think, and you tell me whether I'm wrong, if he fixed up the border and worked out ways in which illegal immigrants couldn't come in these numbers, he might actually stop the rioting at the same time.
Well, I think the thing is, British people are not racist and they're not even anti-migrant. But what they do not like to see is the complete loss of control over the border. They don't like to see, I think it was more than 700 people coming in a single day. Yep. And it worries people because they can visibly see the government, that the security services, the people who are supposed to protect us have completely lost control. It's not just that as well. You know, when people come here, they're able to often claim asylum, or even if they're rejected for asylum, they don't get deported. So there have been cases where there was a recent very notorious case of a man who was free to attack a woman and her children with acid. And he had been denied asylum twice, was granted asylum eventually because he had faked his conversion to Christianity. And everyone with a brain knew that this was a bogus case, but apparently not our august migration judges. And, you know, he should have been, there were so many opportunities to support him that were never taken. I mean, there's limited things we can say about the suspect in Leicester Square, who is alleged to have killed alleged to have stabbed a 11-year-old child. But, you know, what we do know is that this is someone from Romania, someone who is homeless, who under normal circumstances would, of course, not be given permission to come into the UK. So people are asking, why are some of these people here? What are they contributing to society? Yes, we want to help people who are genuinely running from, fleeing from war and terror. British people are very generous like that. We have allowed over 200,000 people from Hong Kong to come to escape CCP tyranny. We've taken over 100,000 Ukrainians. No one is complaining about that. No one has a problem with that. What people have a problem with is the sense that things are completely out of control, that we don't know who is coming in, that we don't often believe that the asylum claims are particularly robust, that they don't have a right to be here, and yet the government seemingly does nothing. The government is more interested in coming after people on Facebook than it is on securing our borders and securing the streets.
I saw an interview with James Cleverly, the Tory leadership aspirant, the other day, and he was saying there is a link between a lack of security in Britain and illegal immigration, and the government needs to get that through their head. Tell me a little bit about the Muslim rioters, the ones wearing balaclavas. I'm seeing a lot of footage of their actions, but not a police officer in sight. And one report said that officers literally ran from Muslim rioters in Leeds, but came down like a hammer on these so-called far-right extremist thugs. Is it true?
Okay, so there are two distinct events here that we need to talk about. So about 2 weeks before the rioting broke out after the Southport murders, there was a riot in Leeds, as you've alluded to. Now that wasn't Muslims; that was the Roma community who were rioting, and it was sparked by a kind of altercation. Someone's had a child taken away by social services, and yes, in that occasion, you can literally see footage of the police running away. There were thousands of people on the street on that occasion, and essentially the police decided, we're just going to let this fizzle out. We'll let it burn out. They arrested a few people. They arrested someone who was quite flagrantly caught on camera setting fire to a bus. They certainly didn't crack down on it particularly harshly. In fact, the local council put out a statement praising the diversity of the area, which I thought was extraordinary. I'm not sure what the relevance of that was. But that gave you a hint. That gives you a hint as to what is going on here and how the authorities treat different groups. Then in the middle of the sort of far-right riots, if you want to call them that, there was in Birmingham, there was a fear that essentially far-right rioters were going to attack this part of Birmingham, and lots of Muslims came out onto the street and they said they were going to defend their mosque, defend their local area. Now, on one level, you could say, well, that might be understandable if that's all they were doing. But actually, a lot of people turned out with weapons. They were driving around doing sort of wheelies on bicycles and doing handbrake turns in their cars. a group of people actually went up to a pub, started harassing, pub goers. A man was beaten up outside a pub. People ganged up on him. Journalists were chased out of the area. Sky News had a broadcast van. The tyres were stabbed at. And there were no police. And people were asking the next day, well, where were the police? It turns out that the police had a meeting with what they euphemistically call community leaders. And, they basically mean people from the mosque, I suppose. But the community leaders had said, we want to police this ourselves. And you think, so that's okay then? Are certain groups essentially allowed to decide what level of policing is appropriate when they know that there are going to be large numbers of people on the streets, potentially with weapons? So that is why I think there are some accusations. Keir Starmer has got this nickname, two-tier Keir. It's become famous. Even Elon Musk is using it. Some of the accusations are a bit unfair because people are conflating, some quite violent rioting with protests. And I agree that people who commit violence must go to prison. I have no objection to that. But we have seen, in the past few weeks, a very different treatment of different groups when they actually riot and commit violence. And that is what should deeply, deeply worry us.
That's a comprehensive rundown of the state of the UK at the moment, which is quite frightening, I've got to say. Fraser Myers, fantastic to have you on the program from Spiked. We look forward to talking again.